Good evening, everyone. I am Canon John Denaro, the rector of St. Anne and the Holy Trinity Church and Pro Cathedral in downtown Brooklyn. I am very happy to be here and to welcome you to our program this evening that we are calling Love and Hunger. Our featured guests are the Reverend John Merz and his friend and colleague Neil Sheehan, who are the founders, co-founders, among some number, of a project here in Brooklyn called North Brooklyn Angels, which is helping to feed thousands of people now. And I'm going to let them tell you about the program. I want to first acknowledge a few things about tonight, to say thank you to both of them, and also thank Teddy Byrne, who is behind the scenes helping out tonight, and I should also thank Denise Fillion, the communications officer of the Episcopal Diocese of Long Island, and also Mary Beth Welch, who's the director of Episcopal Ministries of Long Island, who's offered some insights into the broad range of programs, organizations, institutions across the Episcopal Diocese of Long Island that are addressing the needs of hunger in their communities, from the Brooklyn Bridge to Montauk Point, actually. And what has been observed is not a surprise that meal programs that existed before the pandemic, that were up and running and meeting a real need of serious reality of hunger that existed in our city and across the diocese before, as I said, before the pandemic. Many of these programs have had to pivot and adapt to address an incredibly exploding kind of need. And so we wanted to hear from North Brooklyn Angels because they figured out how to pivot and did an incredible job. And I think there's a lot to learn from them and to share. And as we move through the program, really listening to our friends talk to one another about what they've been up to, we'll get nearer to the end of this 45 minutes or so and give you an opportunity to ask them questions. And you can use the chat for that. So without further ado, I want to welcome Father Merz and Neil Sheehan. And I want to ask them, there they are. I want to thank you guys so much for joining us. And I want to ask you, I see Teddy's working on getting you spotlighted. I want to ask you guys to introduce yourselves to the folks who've come to hear from you tonight.
You want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm the Reverend John Merz. I'm the vicar of the Church of the Ascension in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, and been here now for 10 years, and co-founded with Neil this North Brooklyn Angels.
And I'm Neil Sheehan. I'm the other co-founder. I've been in Brooklyn for 67 years and a little change. And I was happy to meet John when he came into the community, and the two of us together got into a nice conversation about how we can build a strong community, and from a biblical point of view, have those who have a little bit more help those who have a little bit less, thus the North Brooklyn Angels.
Thank you, guys. And we're going to hear a lot more from you. I was grateful that my friend John sent some videos that you folks made to share with others what you're doing through North Brooklyn Angels. And I'm going to ask Teddy if he would show those videos. One was made, if I'm right, before the pandemic, and the other during the pandemic, right?
Correct. The one that says "Why Volunteer" was the original promotional video. And then we just produced one to kind of do a year-end recap.
Great. All right, so we'll watch those back to back, and that, I think, will give us something to move from after we see them. So Teddy?
One of the challenging things in a place like Brooklyn is that you'll see people with wealth, all kinds of cutting edge things happening and attractions, and then you see people who've lived in neighborhoods forever, income deprived, watching the organic aisles open up, prices go up, watching their rent go up, or the price of a cup of coffee.
All of the affluence and all of the kind of fashionable nature of it all conceals many people in the community who don't experience this level of affluence. And the project allows the various members of these communities to recognize each other.
North Brooklyn Angels is a direct action volunteer program that focuses on hunger and poverty.
It's really always enjoyable to see kind of the smiles on people's faces when they have this hot, delicious meal.
The idea is using food as a window into building a relationship with people and then finding out what their needs are in the community.
I've been kind of looking for a way to utilize my culinary skills and got hooked up with them through some friends that volunteered.
Most people I find that they had a bad break or they can't make ends meet and stuff, they're not lazy, they have pride, but they need a helping hand once in a while.
When people come volunteer on the regular, come out and see who's in line, they understand that one, hunger isn't just something for homeless people, but also you start to meet people and develop relationships, and I think it gives you a bigger understanding.
Volunteering gave me a much deeper perspective of life here in Williamsburg.
There's more to life than just going through every day and making money in your business. You got to take care of people.
One of the challenges in gentrification is that it's not an individual person's responsibility or fault. It's a macro issue, but people rub up against each other. And if they're living different lives and they don't have a way to interact and smile at each other, then there's really two neighborhoods. And you know what? Brooklyn has 1 million neighborhoods, but we don't need a neighborhood split in half.
It's building cohesion in a rapidly gentrifying community, allowing people across socioeconomic divides to be constructively engaged with one another as neighbors, not as server and client. It's neighbors helping neighbors. The root of the word neighbor is to be nigh, which means to be close. One thing we are in New York is close to one another.
The Angel thing is really a two-part experience. We feed about 3,000 meals a week in our typical model. But I think those of us who envisioned the organization, what we see is the smiles on the people doing the work.
So many people really appreciate the value of cooking for another, giving food to someone who is hungry, sharing a meal with someone who is hungry.
Most days, you'll see 25 people volunteering, and that's, to me, the biggest miracle besides being able to get the food out there is just the amount of people that come down every day.
That sense of community is a beautiful thing and something that I was drawn to right when I started working with this group.
There's a lot of people out there who say they're gonna do this and that, but we're here making it happen whenever we can. So that makes us feel good. Yes.
Well, when the city shut down, people lost their jobs. That means no food for some of the families. The senior center's closing, so that means the seniors have no food. Now the community center closing where the kids go, now they're not gonna have these meals.
We were 12 hours away from shutting down in March when the governor declared us an essential service. And the local pastor in the church gave us the keys as he was locking up the church and said, go for it, do what you can.
During the height of the pandemic, we saw just how much respect we have for one another, how much respect we have for each other's work, but also understanding the populations that we serve and how vulnerable they are.
These organizations came together. I mean, not only do I feed the tenants within Cooper Park houses, it goes through the whole community. We don't leave nobody out, you know, and I really appreciate the support that I get from these people.
It helps a lot of people in the neighborhood because especially even before the coronavirus, it was a situation where people, you know, some people are struggling, but now more than ever, especially the coronavirus, even people that were doing good at one time now lost jobs.
I was talking to this woman walking down the street like a few minutes ago, and she heard about the North Brooklyn Angels truck coming, and she was like so excited about it.
So one of the things that encourages me the most is literally neighbors helping neighbors.
You just feel more connected to the community, and yeah, it's a nice feeling.
And it feels good when you see happy faces when you're giving them food. So it makes you happy too.
Yeah, it's a really nice environment with a lot of like-minded folk who see a need and want to help. It's gratifying.
I think throughout Brooklyn I've seen people who just really care, and I think New Yorkers in general are resilient and they're not willing to just watch something go on without doing something about it.
I would put our community up against any other in the United States as one of the winningest centers for community spirit and for fighting for justice and for winning by neighbors for neighbors.
So I want to turn this over to you. I have some basic questions. How did you start? Why did you start? How did you start? How did you evolve? How did you decide you could not only do what you were doing, but then, you know, ratchet it up to do so much more when when hunger spiked in the city? Take it away.
All right, I'll start real quick with well, we started because initially there was a very small soup kitchen on the Tuesday at Ascension. It was really just soup. And we moved that meal to Saturdays. And on Saturdays, this was in our old parish hall, which has since been sold. And we got a local chef got involved, Josh Cohen, who comes into the story later on. And he started producing large meals. And from that, we started getting about 90 to 100 people coming on Saturdays. And Neil's been involved with everything we've been doing all along. And from there came a time when we were going to sell the back building of our parish hall. And Neil had already been involved in a project at St. John's Bread and Life Soup Kitchen in Brooklyn, which involved a mobile soup kitchen. And we started talking about what about taking what looked like the closure of a soup kitchen, which would have happened in the back hall, and having a more mobile model where we could go meet the need in the community. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I think the challenge with gentrification for food programs that are inside, and to their credit, religious institutions often, is that poor people get pushed around, they get pushed out of places, and even though you want to serve them, they may no longer be living where they were. So mobility is critical in this process. At least that was my sense of things. And having looked at St. John's Bread and Life in Bed-Stuy and watched their model, we decided we wanted to make something bigger and better than their model in terms of the Angelmobile, that big blue truck you folks probably just saw in the video. So that's what led us to mobility. And then the other part of this was mobility then would allow us to build coalitions. So we were able to bring in all kinds of different organizations, social service organizations, religious organizations, ethnic organizations, tenant organizations as membership, which allowed us to be different places each day, and then having people take over our truck and provide and deliver the food. When I say deliver it, plate it and give it to people, so that they're literally getting food from their neighbors.
So just to jump in there to clarify that a little bit. So when we go to Cooper or Margin Street or Cooper houses, we show up with the truck, and in a normal model, we would have steam tables inside there and lots of food in large hotel pans. And there are volunteers from Cooper houses who come out and they know their neighbors and they operate the truck, and we have our driver and maybe a volunteer who comes along. So
I just want to get a little rudimentary though. Where is the food coming from? Like you can't just, you got to have food to deliver food. And you talk about the relationships with the members of the communities that you're serving, but there had to be some relationships that, you plugged into in order to, get this thing up off the ground.
Sure. Well, for those interested in developing food programs, there are institutional players in the food industry. Probably heard about them. We'll see Food Bank. Sometimes you'll see advertising on TV. City Harvest. There's another newer organization called Rethink. We partnered with those organizations, but we also brought in restaurant people in the community who would be committed to help us cook food. And we get a lot of free food from the green markets, and cook some of that and give some of that directly away. And then we fundraise. We ask people, you have a few bucks, do you want to buy a hat? And put that money to work. But we began the organization with one full-time staff person. Everybody else was a volunteer. So we kept costs down so we could push most of the money into the food. And I should say that the Episcopal Ministries was one of our founding partners.
You should. I should have, but I'm glad you did. Thank you for mentioning that.
I think that's, coincidentally, we spent some time with Bishop Larry today.
That's right. I heard about that.
He was telling us how wonderful the program was. I said, well, it's your program. Without you, we wouldn't be here. So, but hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah.
Relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you give me some stats? Like how many were you, the first day out, or the first year, and then what year was that, by the way? And then how does,
4 years. 4 years out. The theme in the first year was, if you remember that movie Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. So this was the theory that we would go out into the community and put the truck in different locations where there were people who wanted to work it for us as volunteers, and where we thought that it would best work. And the first year, we were hoping to provide 20 or 30,000 meals. We ended up providing 55,000 meals.
The first year?
The first year, yeah. And currently, last year, we provided 190,000 meals. But we then added in the hospital, which was 37,000 meals to feed the doctors and nurses in Woodhull.
Yeah, let me kill
Because
that.
my friend John doesn't listen to instructions because I
didn't shut it off. It's done.
Yeah. So so those would be kind of your numbers, and then we I don't think I just mentioned we added distributing food, not cooked, but fresh vegetables, surplus food. So last year we gave out 670,000 pounds of food for people to take home and cook, in addition to 5,000 pairs of socks. People probably might have heard of Bombas, which is they found us. A lot of materials and stuff we've given out. Since we have that platform, we can distribute. It's interesting, the large food bank and City Harvest I mentioned earlier, they're looking for organizations that can distribute food effectively. So they see us as an extension of themselves. And they've been very good working with us in terms of helping us get equipment and so that we can cook, so we can hold stuff over. So those are some of the numbers that we were looking at. I mentioned the hospital program, but that was a temporary program that we ran in April of last year.
April, well, it was March, April. Was it 3 months?
Yeah, we ended in early June.
It was 27,000 meals.
Right.
I think we did.
Yeah, so we were running, we reopened a closed diner and hired back the workers who had been laid off. And we produced 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, that were grab and go meals, so that the doctors and nurses at Woodhull Hospital would be able to jump out, because ironically everything was closed around them, so they were eating cold pizza, and they really weren't getting a good healthy meal.
Yeah.
And we weren't sure again what that would be like. I always say to people, I took the first meal. It was about 2 miles from the hospital. And I had to pull over 4 times that morning because of ambulances bringing people into it. So my doubts were gone before the first meal that this was something that needed to happen. These people were killing themselves, and if what little bit we could bring them. So that was a temporary piece we just put in place. But we've been able to get people on social media. I'm a dinosaur. I don't know anything about it. They sometimes use me as for fun. But we were able to go on there and let people know that, hey, you could help this, and just throw up a GoFundMe. My experience has been that don't be shy. If you're going to volunteer and feed people, most people respect the fact that everybody deserves a decent meal 2 times a day. People are very generous and they get it. It's simple. I spent 30 years in social service, mental health, addiction, housing. It's complicated. You need to have professionals involved in that stuff. In the food model works for us because anyone can play a part. We have firemen who are retired to drive the truck, transit workers. We have accountants who do the books. We have, you can contribute. And in our model, we don't want your life. We want 5 hours a week, maybe.
And also, both the videos, one was created by a parishioner of mine, another one was created by another volunteer. One of the things that happened at the beginning of the pandemic, which was truly astounding, was we kind of put together, it seemed like it was a task force we were having these Zoom calls with, 8 or 9 people were on them. And it was immensely talented people whose jobs and other things were now temporarily beached. And they had all of this creativity and energy. And we were having these incredible planning meetings and how to get through all this together. And people's skills really started surfacing.
Yeah, I mean, if folks remember institutionally, a lot of Easter was canceled, and that turned into 200 pounds of chocolate eggs for us. But then became cookies because some guys came in and baked them for us. It was kind of like taking the lemons and squeezing them and making the lemonade, literally, because so many things were falling apart.
Right.
And the video did make reference to, we were very close to closing because our traditional model had to be modified. We couldn't put 5 people in a truck by steam tables. It was too dangerous with the virus. So we literally had to get a big space, 6 foot apart, and have people pack the food in a big auditorium and then put it on their truck. So we're still doing that now, but hopefully, God willing, by the end of the summer, we'll be able to go back to the steam tables as our volunteers are all vaccinated.
That reminds me, I want to go back just a little bit to some more fundamentals about, what you're doing, because maybe I missed it, and I think I know, but I want to, I ask you to share it for folks who are listening. What exactly what was the model from the outset? Was it a hot meal that was prepared and then kept warm and then driven to these locations, right?
So what it was meals were prepared. Well, portions of meals. So say there's the protein, there might be the vegetables. Various hotel pan trays were created in the kitchen. They were then put in what are called cambros, which are like airplane containers. They're loaded onto a truck. They're driven to a section of the neighborhood, pulling up at a site that is familiar to the neighbors there. volunteers come onto the truck. It's all set up, and those trays are put into steam tables to keep them warm for an hour or two. And then each individual container is plated and then handed, to the people that come in a bag. So that's the original process. Right. And this process, as Neil mentioned, once the thing hit, it's hard to remember, but people were afraid to be near each other, and so we really had to think quickly, well, if we're going to do this, how do we do this in a way that we don't become the news story of, the spreading site. And so we had to do it, switch to a model where there's a long line and a person scoops the chicken and then slides the tray down 6 feet away to somebody else who puts in the vegetables, and, and everybody's gloved and masked. And
so you were still committed to serving a hot meal. It wasn't like we're now going to wrap up meatball sandwiches. Like you knew what your model was. You weren't, once you could figure out how to do it in COVID, you kept that up.
One of the things changed. Yes, that's correct. But also we developed a relationship with World Central Kitchen. It was first somebody else, but then we got passed off to World Central Kitchen. And basically we also were getting a second meal prepared in a reheatable container. So we were pairing our hot meal with a World Central Kitchen meal, so they could eat one on the spot or take it home and eat it, and then have another one for that night. Wow. So right now, say for instance, today we sent out essentially 1,000 meals, and half of them were home cooked meals, cooked hot meals, and half were, but one of the funny things, I don't want to ramble too long, but we lost at one point, and this is just a crazy community thing. We lost the World Central Kitchen meals. So one of our partners and local volunteers, who we had already been working with, a guy from Star Chefs, which is an organization which sponsors chefs, and it's a national organization, a guy named Will Blunt, he happens to serve on Jose Andres' board for World Central Kitchen. So we were going to get all of these meals X'd out of our process. Through a series of emails, he contacted him directly, and he's an international figure, and the meals came back, for a time. But that's one of these ways in which, there are people who have relationships already that you don't even know about, and they appear,
Yeah.
Yeah. And also we were able to add delivering additional meals. One of the things that we did when the hospital rates dropped at Woodhull, and they decided they could reopen their cafeteria, we decided to shift to the senior delivery program, because the seniors would be the future guests at the hospital if they had to go out in the streets looking for food and everything else in terms of the virus. So we moved to a program which still exists today, where we've got 10 volunteers who actually come and take the meals literally from us and deliver them individually to seniors. Because the senior, you might have heard the woman Deborah mention, everything closed. The senior centers closed, the schools closed. So people were getting food, I mean, the portals all shut down. So we said, let's do seniors because they're the most at risk. And we've still been doing that. And again, it's all volunteers coming to us. They take the food right off the line. You might take eight to somebody, someone else takes 7, someone else takes, and they do it 3 times.
I mean, so like I'm
overwhelm you and your audience, but,
What's that?
Hopefully we didn't overwhelm you.
I mean, that's what I'm like. I mean, I'm filling up with this amazing sense of, the good that you're doing. I mean, it is overwhelming, but in a good way. But so again, just because some of this is, I want to get to more lofty things, but I still want to stick with some of the, the basics. So how many locations were you delivering to when you started, and how many locations are you delivering to now? And just to add a question about what you were just saying, Neil, like if you got like people driving a truck and people handing bags, 7 bags and 6 bags. Like, that's a lot of organization every day. And by the way, is it 5 days a week? Is that what you do?
It's 5 days a week directly, and then there's ironically, the original program that came out of Ascension Church has been morphed into a Saturday program that a whole group of young, very young adults come serve out of the back of cars. So we actually we fill their cars with the food, and they do.
And then there's Sunday in the summer too. So there's, because Sunday is the pickup from the Green Market.
Yes.
You know. But originally, and Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, we were going to 5 locations originally. One per day. Load the truck, take it there, bring it back. Now, when the pandemic started, so an example would be, and I'm not going to run through it all. Mondays we do St. Anthony's Church on Manhattan Avenue. That's our stop. So now we do St. Anthony's 2 days a week, Monday and Wednesday, right? Or Thursday. Monday and Thursday is St. Anthony's. And so everybody's kind of getting now 2 shots, two spots a week. And then the seniors are,
the seniors are 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And then the other thing we did is because we're packaging food at the kitchen, literally, we do 2 times a week, literally at the kitchen. Someone can pick up a meal at the door.
Oh.
You know, so since we're packaging it all. In the past, we would have been putting big trays on the truck.
And at the end of the day, when everything is, sometimes when there's leftover stuff or bags of food, it just goes to the community refrigerator, which is a couple blocks away. There's a community fridge. And then one of our volunteers, who's a parishioner at my church, who's an everyday guy, he's kind of taken on this personal thing to bring 6 meals every day to a group of folks that live under the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. So, but you know, you made a point before. I just want to clarify something. You know, it does seem overwhelming, right? There's so many people, but it's not as if, you know, like there are so many moving parts to this, and there's so much cooperation and collaboration that it's not as if there's one person. You know, it's not like we're doing this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is the folks from Mutual Aid in the neighborhood do a lot of the senior deliveries. There's so many different players.
Right. Also, there's a citywide volunteer app called Deed. For your audience that's listening, if you're thinking about doing a program or you want to see our program, typically our program it's local, but Deed is citywide. You can go on there and look up North Brooklyn Angels, and you can sign up for a 2.5 hour shift. And you know, come down, tell us you saw us on the Zoom, and you know we'll say, but you'll be able to get your hands, and you'll get a sense of the process. Again, our experience is people sign up, people want to help. Again, they want a piece of your action. They don't want a forever. They don't want 20 hours a week. You know, the drivers don't want to drive every day. The drivers want to drive once a week. You know,
I think this, just for folks listening also, I think this is something critical from a church standpoint and just in general that Neil's making a point about, which is we have a very cohesive and clear and well-organized operation. So the boundaries to get in and to get out are very low. And it's really, you're going to experience, we don't allow anybody to kind of like dominate the food service or the line. We try to keep a very healthy atmosphere, focused on the work we're doing and the service we're doing. So it really allows you to come, you know, for whatever your motivation is, to come in, to enter, and to leave without a lot of friction and the maximal satisfaction.
And it builds community because the people are having a social experience. They mop the floors, they wash the dishes. And if we have leftover food, we feed them. We sit them down, say, have a meal together, and you're building that dynamic.
One more example, because now we're getting into the Abbott and Costello time. We can just talk for 5 hours. You know?
Yeah, your poor audience might have a question.
You know, we'll get to a question segment, but like, here's an example of the community pulling together. So we have, say on a Friday, there'll be 25 volunteers, all young folks at the kitchen. John's Pizza, which is great pizza, by the way.
Joe's Pizza.
Joe's Pizza.
Hey, get it
Joe's.
right.
I gotta get it right.
Too many Johns.
Yeah, Joe's in the Village and Joe's in Brooklyn. They deliver 10 pies. And so on Fridays, so every Friday's become this kind of like special time where everybody eats.
Yeah.
You know,
I want to.
And the entire audience is going to sign up for Friday.
Yeah, exactly. I want to get to the community piece. I just to get to one more particular statistic, I guess, or related to this explosion of need and the numbers that you shared. So you said you went from like 55 in your first year to 190 plus this year meals served. And you explained, part of that, it sounds like, was the delivery to the hospital, which was temporary. But still, it sounds like there's a lot more need you're addressing. And are you seeing more people in the locations you already committed to, or are you going to more locations?
Both, actually.
Both.
Both, yeah. And we're looking at going to Bushwick. We just had a meeting in Bushwick.
Okay, well, so that I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, just that brings me to another piece of this. I mean, so, I think what you guys have been addressing is, there's a hunger, there's real hunger, physical hunger, and there's a hunger for community, and there's a hunger to serve. It's all of that. And you guys are finding a way to address all three of those things, and maybe hunger in other ways I can't even imagine. So I want to hear about the community dynamic and some of the ways, because John, you and I talked when I first asked you to do this. You said, like, this is really about, it's not just about feeding people, it's about building community. And I want to ask you to speak to that. I also want, because of what Neil was just saying, I want to invite you to speak to the ways that you are not so much, I mean, maybe it is just pure expanding, but you're starting to support groups like Nell Archer, who's writing in right now, to think about how they can make programs work and how you might partner with other church communities and otherwise to just continue to address this reality that isn't going away, and always, in all senses.
You want to go first?
Sure. Well, I have two addictions in life. One is caffeine and the other is organizing. And just as a super fast tutorial, a lot of confusion in organizing. An organizer's role is to organize leaders. Leaders are people who are healthy and balanced, they're busy and have influence or followers. Not to be distinguished from activists, which a lot of times we get activists involved who are unstable in a community and spend a lot of time with them, and they're not really leaders, but they think by activity they are. So for me, a lot of this is about, as soon as someone comes into our organization, getting a sense of their stability and challenging them to take on more responsibility and asking them to involve people from their network. And as you continue to do that, you begin to see leaders who then are comfortable working with other leaders. And that's what creates the magic and the ability to multiply. And our role is to just simply facilitate, recognize that, and affirm it. And it's a wonderful role because you see the best of people coming out and growing and working with other people. So, that's to answer your question, you can be a good manager, but managing is doing things right. Leadership is about doing the right things. You can do the wrong thing right, really efficient, just get you to the wrong place fast.
So let me see if I can summarize. Organizers, stable. Activists, unstable. No.
Organizers are all about getting leaders to work together and involve their people. And it's great because you're around exciting people. Obviously sometimes you're not, and then you're really not going to give them a lot of responsibility. you can evolve those.
Well, you really are addressing a kind of basic question, and maybe for tonight, like we don't have to get deep into staffing and personnel and how you, but you have protocols, you have expectations, and it sounds like for all the ways you're engaging people and inviting and welcoming them, you're also being smart, and you're not just saying like, you know, that
you have to have boundaries. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we all have political sense of things, but this is not about politics.
Yeah.
You know, we all, you know, where we all have religious beliefs, but this is not about aggressive conversion.
That's
It's
right.
not, you know, so you bring out, you know, you bring people to the mission and you use their gifts. And as John said, like the people who make the videos, everybody has gifts that can work at some level in this organization.
Well, I'm amazed at how ecumenical, if you will, this whole thing, this whole, enterprise is, because you've got church communities, faith communities, and you've got folks who aren't identified with a particular faith tradition or institution, but they want to support it, and nobody's pushing their issue. It's just that you're all committed to this singular goal. And I think that's amazing.
I think that's something is important to mention in relation to activism, you know, because we have folks who are part of our organizational, who pitch in from every angle, who come from all kinds of backgrounds, have all kinds of political affiliations.
Right.
We're not sitting here, you know, the country's been it's been in turmoil for the last 2 years, and we have folks who volunteer regularly who are Trump supporters, who were trying, you know, who some are on the right, some are on the left, but people put those things aside and build relationships. And they begin to respect one another for seeing the good that they have, the heart they bring to the work, and the caring they bring, and it opens up people to be more.
The other thing about food and work and rubbing up against poor people is it creates a cognitive dissonance for those who are skeptical of how bad the problem is, or if the problem exists. And that cognitive dissonance raises consciousness. So people come up and say, and I love when someone says, it shouldn't be like this in America. You know, that's the beginning of saying, okay, what can we do about it?
Yeah.
We've got it on our block, but why is it like this?
Or an example of that would be when we were at on the Avenue, on Manhattan Avenue, and seeing people coming out of retail chain stores coming to have lunch from us. You start wondering, you realize they're minimum wage workers.
Yeah.
You know, there are folks who are working full-time jobs. You know, what need is in New York City is very ecumenical.
Yeah. Yeah, we have home attendants regularly on the line, and when they first came, they came to get a meal. You know, or the priest said we could get a meal for the person that we take care of. And we were like, well, why don't you take two? Wouldn't you like to have one yourself? You know?
Yeah, I just have to interject something about sort of a personal thing about our pantry at St. Anne's, which is at the moment we're just offering bags of non-perishable food, although a local supermarket saw us in action and said we have produce, and we have a local neighbor who's donating a lot of fresh things. So it's kind of expanded because of all this generosity. But it's still true. In the very beginning, I know I kind of got to understand, like, you know, there were nannies in the neighborhood coming for a bag of food. You know, there were working people. This was not just the poorest of the poor. This was really, there was the reality of need was not, you couldn't, you know, narrow it down to a thing or two. It was really
gentrifying communities. The rent destabilization just creates all kinds of needs for pharmaceutical, for prescriptions, for food. You see people trying to make choices, and and Brooklyn, the inner city's been gentrifying, and now with the pandemic and the suburbs, it's happening in those places too. the other thing about mobility and coming out on the sidewalk is that, you know, there are some lots and lots of miraculous things happening in churches. And I don't mean just in the tabernacle. I mean in the 12-step world, I mean in the food pantry world, regardless of the size, there's all this good happening. But it's nice to bring it out so other people can see it, enjoy it, so that if they're in conflict with the sacramental side or the theological side, they could come in another way into the process. You know? I mean, so we have, you know, you have people coming and they'll look at us and people start to talk about us. So you're outside of church. You say, well, you know, they'll tell you about the gospel in there, but you know, you're doing it now. Like it's happening. You're rubbing elbows with me and putting food in. You're doing fine. But if you want to know more, just, you know, you go in there. It might be a little mysterious, but you might find something out. But the mobility and coming out, I think, is important. I mean, I think it's, you know, I mean, it's the missionary work of all of us, the inner city stuff.
Yeah, no, that is one of the powerful. I mean, you know, I want to ask, but I'm aware that there's at least one question, and I want to, you know, I want to make this something that is, you know, not open-ended and all over the place. I want to be mindful of people's time tonight, but you know, you remind me as you say that, Neil, because I want sort of getting back to the truck, and John described, you know, how the trays are, you know, brought into the truck, and then the plating, and so you had to think about this, right? Like, who knew about truck, you know, food truck delivery construction? Like, how did that become something you figured out?
Let's just say this: the truck itself was based on a model that St. John's Bread and Life had done. But I will say, and I'm only going to say a quick thing about this, our actual execution of the food truck, it came a year later. So Neil and I had already been meeting with people, coalition members in the neighborhood, and we were talking about a mysterious giant blue truck that people started to think, what are these guys? Are they running a Ponzi scheme? Are they running a pyramid? There's no truck. The truck was supposed to be here 9 months ago. You know, so things didn't all go smoothly, but we just kept, you know, pushing on, and that's a distant memory.
Yeah, at least John had one coherent affiliation, which was Episcopal Ministries Truth Bishop Larry. But people were looking at me saying, what is this Irish Catholic guy doing with this nice, rich Jewish couple and this Episcopal bishop? He's thinking about a truck, you know. Yeah. So
well, I was on the board of Episcopal Ministries of Long Island at the time, so I remember not only how generous the bishop had decided we needed to be, but also how long it took you guys to get the truck.
There's a question that just
I know. How many trucks and who finances the truck?
This leads. So there was Episcopal Ministries money. There was local business people's money. There was a whole bunch of different things went into the capital of the initial truck. But now we've gotten a van from the Brooklyn Roasting Company, which is a coffee company who donated a van to us. ExxonMobil had donated a van to us at one point that was on its last legs. And then the Brooklyn Nets donated a brand new Honda 2021 Odyssey. And now we're in discussions.
We're in preliminary brainstorming discussions.
Yeah. We'll just say there may be more trucks on the horizon, and we have other models and other projects that we don't want to jinx.
I got it. Yeah. I was thinking, by the way, that the Nets, because I knew about that, John. You told me that, and I was thinking they might have donated because your acronym is NBA. Is that at all the reason?
No, it isn't. I was hoping, I used to have season tickets, so I was hoping they were going to give us season tickets, but no such luck.
I'd say they made the more practical donation. And so, well, it's exciting to hear that. And maybe just as we start to wind down, I want to get back to this idea of sort of the bridging or the connecting, that you're committed to now. As intriguing as what you're working on is, you told me that you are talking to other churches and other, kind of interconnecting with other programs. And can you say more about that? Just like, what can people, can they seek your support? How can you help folks who are thinking about trying to do something and meet the need that there is in their community?
Well, I think we'd be happy to meet with anybody individually about a program.
Yeah.
If there's somebody out there that's really ambitious and wants to leapfrog us, we would be happy to. We own the Brooklyn Angels website domain.
Okay.
So
if they want to help create a larger, but I think
if we could do maybe we do hot dogs in 20 hours.
I think that we are all for talking to anybody about it. But I mean, one of the things that, so we were talking with, I'll use an example, with Nell, Mother Nell and the folks at Bushwick Abbey. And we were looking to possibly supply them with meals, cooked meals. And right now they would be involved in distributing them. So they'd be like a distribution point. But now I'm just raising this theoretically. So I don't want to commit to numerous groups, but theoretically, say for instance, Tuesday for us is our light day. That's the day we do the least. If we kept our capacity the same or raised it up, to one of the higher days, we would be able to provide meals to another church where they would be a distribution hub, maybe 2 or 3 churches, let's say. But the goal there would not just be that we would supply the meals and they would just distribute them. We would hope and help and assist and in some ways teach how to engage some folks in the community, their mutual aid networks, other civic groups, to start building. The idea is that they would develop and build that kind of momentum and catalyzation in the community. So if you're thinking of doing it alone at your place, it's tempting to get bogged down and say, well, we only have 3 people here. And if I commit to this, I'm going to get buried under the weight of being committed to it. And instead of seeing, I'm going to commit to it, but we're going to spend a lot of time bringing in other people. And when it starts getting successful, I'm not going to have to run it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. The other thing I would say, and I don't mind saying this, I've given Bishop Larry this idea a few times, which is when I contrast Catholic Charities and Episcopal Ministries is more suited for our kind of mission. Catholic Charities builds hardcore professional social services, all kinds all over the place. But Episcopal Ministries, the diocese could be looking, and we could certainly help at a county effort, so that as we're doing a neighborhood effort where we've got Greenpoint, Williamsburg, we're pulling churches together, maybe there's a cluster of churches and they'd want to look at a county strategy. And I would just overlay in that there's the Vincent de Paul societies have this custom called twinning. And
what is it called?
Twinning, which is similar, as we say, having the more affluent people in North Brooklyn help the less affluent people.
Yeah.
Twinning is one congregation adopting another congregation, being the support or the material support for the
right.
So within an Episcopal ministries model, that folks could think strategically and tactically, talk about whether one parish wanted to help in a county, or one county wanted to help another county, or whatever, and then use the Episcopal ministry as a kind of a catalyst for that happening. So those would be other models, but just not to overwhelm everybody. I don't know who's out there listening, but if people are working in a food pantry, people are working in a kitchen once a month, the thing I definitely want to say is that, the miracle of feeding 5,000 people on the mountain, the loaves and the fishes, I firmly believe that it's just as much a miracle if you've got nothing and you're feeding 5 people. All right. The miracle is people making something happen, and that's really in reference to following the Jesus model there.
Right.
So we should dignify all of those efforts, and we should try to refuel them by bringing other people into those processes.
Right. But John, well, that's a beautiful thing you said, Neil. And just to connect the two things that you each just said, Father John's saying that you shouldn't feel overwhelmed by the idea of trying to do something when there aren't that many people there, ready to work, because there's people locally. I mean, this is something that Mary Beth and I talked about earlier today, that there are resources in your community and you just have to look for them. And that's something that you might, practically speaking, help people realize or help connect them to.
It's like I don't want to say I see ghosts, but it's like the Holy Ghost. I mean, you really have to, like Neil said at the beginning, if you build it, they will come. It really is a faith leap. It's the same thing in building a congregation. You look and you see more people because you're always anticipating. Because if you're doing something, you believe is filled with the Holy Spirit and God, you believe that it's there for people you haven't met yet.
And if you overshoot and you're running out of the material resource to give to people, that becomes a very compelling message in your larger community for people to get behind you.
Yeah.
So it's a strength. Your weakness becomes a strength.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned earlier, John, is really, could be slowed down and looked at a little bit. Like you guys said, you know what, let's do this thing, in the middle of a pandemic. Like, let's start a small kind of pop-up food pantry, which, surprise, surprise, is not going to allow to be pop-up anymore. It's going to, people are depending on it now. And then you have the local supermarket notices it, and then somebody else notices it. And, then that energy starts to build. And that's exciting to see that generosity.
I agree.
That, it's beautiful to be a part of it.
Yeah, and most people volunteering go home smiling. I mean, it sounds funny. They work hard, but they go home smiling. They probably sleep well. And people understand you have growing pains,
And I have to say one thing, because it's related to what Neil just said. It's related to the pandemic. I understand we're getting there to the time. But you think about back in the pandemic, especially in the earlier, more difficult moments, to come to a space where there's music, there's constructive activity, there's 25 people safely spread out. I've taken up to talking to some of these folks lately and asking them, like, what's this been like? And they say over and over again, the friendships they've formed, the sense of hope they developed, the constructiveness, it allowed them to access something in them and in being connected to others in a very difficult time, which is, invaluable. And Neil and I joked a couple months ago, like, I came in one day and he's like, this is like a giant therapy session. He's like, everybody here is sharing difficult things. I mean,
right.
Stuff they're going through, job loss, people being devastated. But there's there's this safety net. And you actually start to see the community. You start to see it as like a web and a net,
Yeah.
I sometimes go there and I look around and I think, when's the paranoid, insane part of me says, is everybody going to wake up? Because there's so many folks here. They're going to say, what are they actually doing? You can't believe it, that every day it looks like this.
Well, you see, I think what happens is when they have that quality experience, they feel better about things. They'll find another way to manifest that. Let's say they move to California. They'll do something based on that experience.
Well, I had a person who did, Daniel, who was on the line, moved to California, and he said the first thing he wanted to do was start doing something there.
That's incredible. Well, just
do we have questions out there?
No, actually, I don't see any. So I have one.
We can ramble. We're good.
Well, I have one. Maybe final one, which is just about where we are today. And you guys maybe aren't the ultimate experts on the state of hunger in the city, but you're out there on the front lines and you're seeing a lot, and you're paying attention to what's going on around you and reading the news, and you're attentive, insightful people. What is your sense of the need that we'll see around us? How big is it? As big as it's going to get? How far out are we before we see a sort of turn in the other direction? Do you have some sense of that?
I want to say, I mean, that doesn't mean outreach, but from a macro point of view, I hope it's as big as it's going to get. I do think that some things have happened recently in Washington that are really radically groundbreaking, exciting things, like the child tax credit piece. But it's going to take time for that stuff to implement and filter into the system. But I'll just put my commercial out that the child tax care piece is going to cut child poverty in America in half. It's only for 2 years, so it needs to be renewed, folks. If nothing else happens, that needs to happen, because that's the best, the best way for things to happen. For a monthly check to go to a mother who can figure out what's best for her child, and it's not a radical concept. Don't let anybody tell you that. We're just a lot slower than just about every European country has been doing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
I would say there's stuff in the pipeline that should really help. In the immediate, that's not going to change probably in the next 6 months, because things bureaucratically have to move. But there's huge amounts of people looking for food, and people say we're wonderful, but 7 days a week, typically you want a human being to eat 3 good meals. We're not. We'd love to be able to get 21 meals out to somebody. We're away from doing that. There are places we can be every day, literally, and if we're like that, I'm sure we're not alone.
Yeah.
So other folks.
Well, Mother Nell Archer asks if can you foresee a day when your services won't be necessary, and I think you're kind of addressing that. Doesn't strike me that the answer is anytime soon.
Well, yeah. I'm 67, so I'm going to say no. I'm looking for permanent retirement, I think, before that.
Yeah. Well, I won't wrap up. There's one other question here that kind of goes back to an earlier, issue of volunteers and, recruitment. And the question is, do you meet volunteers, or do you have volunteers who get disgruntled, or do you have, I guess, issues with volunteers?
Yeah, sure. We have those issues. They're not as frequent as you would think. They're coming into a group experience and they're interacting with other people socially. People will stick out if they're very disturbed. Other individuals will disappear when they can't, if they're control freaks. I mean, those tend to be
I would also say that because of the environment we've helped establish, it's not unlike, let's say, think about an AA meeting, right? Where you have a lot of chaotic energy, a lot of intense energy, a lot of focused energy coming into a room. Nobody runs the meeting. And there are ground rules in the meeting, no crosstalk, various things that can actually help channel and funnel that energy. There are 2 ways to look at it. One is that because we have created this environment, people who are more stable pick up on those cues, and they brings out the best in them. And for others, you will start to see probably more than you would with others. In other words, if you have a healthy environment, the unhealthy elements will actually show themselves in some ways more vibrantly than otherwise. And do we do something about it? We'll take them aside. Sometimes Neil, who's got a background in mental health, will defer to him. Knows how to sometimes, I'm not even talking about pathologically or clinically,
Sure.
but sometimes, you need to take somebody aside and letting them know what our ethos is and giving them another chance to fit in. And, we've had some situations where people tend to disinvite themselves once you begin to.
Well, if you confront their dysfunction, it gets a little uncomfortable for them.
Well, I mean, given.
But I know you're wrapping up, but again, to dignify everyone, we've looked at it for a long time, I guess, because I had worked in a professional social service field for 37 years, and this model is the antithesis of that. It's a volunteer-centric model. We've looked at typical volunteer models and hybrids and all that kind of stuff. So what I would say to folks who are running small operations and the people who are administering to them is I would do a personal inventory, and I would start to set accountabilities for recruiting new blood numerically, one person a year, 2 people a year. And understand that the typical mantra in a scarce volunteer operation is, we're the only ones who can do this. I would challenge that. When people start to talk that way, I would say it's our responsibility to find our successes and find out. I would make that a measurable model just as much as how many people I'm feeding, because it will breathe life and fertility into your models. And I think we have to teach that to people. It's like someone you want to confront the person who I run the pantry. I don't want anyone else in the room. This is the way I run the room. This is whatever. If they need counseling, whatever they need, but we need to say to them, you will get as much credit and you will get as much recognition in this congregation, in this community, when you bring in other people and allow them to use their unique talents and stuff. It's like, the people who fight over whether the peas should go on the third shelf or the carrots should go on. That's a warning sign that people.
Well,
but it's also, if I can just throw this in to piggyback on Neil, that the leaders there have to be proactive about recognizing that and dealing with it, because if you don't deal with it, it's a major disservice, not only to the other people that are there, but to the possibilities that are alive in the community.
Yeah. I mean, you want everybody in, and you want to give everybody a chance, of course, with boundaries, and I'm not
right.
But the goal. But to be fair to us institutionally, as organizers, as leaders, we need to place importance on that so that people will feel affirmed for doing it.
Yeah.
As opposed to just leaving it as mysterious. Nobody else cares, and that's why I've done this for 40 years, and I don't let anyone else in the room when I'm putting the cans on the shelf.
Right. Listen, any of us who've worked in the church for a while can tell you stories about how that works, and to the detriment of communities. I'm really grateful that you said that, Neil, about always thinking about your successors, thinking about affirming people, thinking about, what little and big things people can do, how good leaders can make other, less experienced leaders better leaders. And it doesn't sound like your big problem is volunteers going off the rails. It sounds like when you have a problem, you address it, and you have to trust people, I think, is kind of what you're saying. You have to kind of assume the best, and that'll get a lot of us a long way. But really making room, I think, is not something that comes easily. And when something works, you want to bottle it and you want to say, this is mine, I did this, but really that's not the model that you're operating on.
I'll give you an example, like one of the local churches I was working with, talking to. So they have a weekly food pantry. So the trick was to get them to rotate the volunteers each month. Because there were certain people that they couldn't mix together. I guess they had a lot of scars. So, but one set in, one set out. Well, more people were involved, and the one set in that was newer, maybe they brought in some other people. So coming up with ways to open slots for people. See, our slots are there all the time. So like people can open them, come for 2 hours, come out. We can put someone else in it, and then we can move them along. That's why expansion is always a possibility.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to ask Teddy, just Franca Floro, I think maybe she has a question. And okay, I'm going to get to that. I want to ask Teddy to put up this slide before we sign off. Franca, if you have a question, could you type it in the chat? Because I'm not sure, unless Teddy can get in there and open your mic, but right now you're muted. But I want to ask Teddy to put the slide up just to give yeah, I see that. So this is just our way of thanking everybody who's come, but also to remind them, I know you had it at the end of your video, how to support you guys, how to find you, northbrooklynangels.org, Episcopal Ministries of Long Island. If you support EMLI, you're going to support, in some ways, a lot of programs, meal programs, and other important socially oriented programs across Long Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island, and our church, because I get to do that because I hosted this. So we have a pantry program. We're feeding about 200 plus people a week now, and you can go to our website and find out about that. Let's see if Franca, okay, you can pull that down, Teddy. Someone's asking if there's reading material that you might recommend, as from volunteering and maybe even for setting up. Like, is there homework for anybody out there? Besides Saul Alinsky.
Besides Saul Alinsky, huh? I don't think they ever published the Organizing for Family and Congregation, but that would have come out of the Industrial Areas Foundation.
Huh. That's too bad.
I always recommend the book by Stephen Covey, which is a bestseller, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Which the habits are actually values. So.
Very good. Let's see, maybe I've got, okay, Franca said no question. She's enjoyed listening. And several of her ministry partners also had joined her and support you greatly. And actually, Mother Marie Tatro, our colleague, is saying the book that people need to read is the one you guys are going to write.
Well, I don't see.
Is that fiction or nonfiction?
Totally nonfiction. So listen, this is. What's that?
It's a graphic comic.
Graphic novel or something. Anyway, here's what I want to say in conclusion. You guys have really done us a solid. You're doing a lot of people a solid, but tonight you offered practical information. You offered, your philosophy behind what you're doing, and you really gave us a spiritual boost. And that's a lot for an hour-long conversation. And I know you take the show on the road all the time, so I can only imagine how many people you're inspiring and having believe, in the power of communities to do good and for neighbors to help their neighbors.
The Diocese of Long Island, without you folks, we wouldn't exist. And I want to thank you for listening to us, and I want to thank you folks for all the work you do. And if we can be helpful, we'll try individually or whatever. You reach out, bother John, and then he'll find me.
Well, northbrooklynangels.org is the place to find you. God bless you both. Thank you very much for what you do. And happy Easter and happy holidays to everyone. All right, peace. We're going to end there. Thank you all for joining us, and blessings one and all. Thanks.